Hello everyone. Welcome to the another amazing session. I'm your host, Misbah, and I'll be kicking this off where we are going to kind of take a deep dive into a very interesting topic of making shift left a practical reality. Joining today, we have Patrick Delamere. Say hello to Patrick, everyone. A seasoned IT expert with over 25 years experience and driving force behind an amazing technology called SimStack. Patrick will introduce us to this innovative open source solution designed to simplify the local environment provisioning and enhance the testing process. And just to tell you a little bit more, with SimStack, you'll learn how to streamline the complexities of setting up your end-to-end environment and how it seamlessly integrates with Lambda test platform. And Patrick will also be covering how Gen AI, which is one of very interesting topic these days, and the theme of our TestMu conference this year, is embedded in the SimStack to accelerate your testing and learning curve and boost productivity. Whether you're dealing with complex cloud setups or just looking to optimize your local environment, this session will provide you the actionable insight and practical examples. And remember, we want to kind of hear from you. So drop your question throughout the presentation. Patrick will address all of those toward the end of it. So let's get started and see how SimStack can transform strategy. So over to you, Patrick.
Great, thanks for that. So I'll just start by sharing my screen so that everybody can see my presentation. Screen. All right, so hopefully you can all see my screen now. So my name is Patrick Delamere. I've been in the IT industry for about 25 years. I've been mainly involved large DevOps teams. And I've seen over the course of my career a lot of challenges, mostly, of course, in the early days, later in production. And then also, of course, later on bringing testing home, shifting left, and trying to get the environment up and running locally on the laptop. And not everybody is, of course, an infrastructure guru. So what I try to do with my experience with this tool is to make life of everybody just a little bit easier. What I'm going to do here is I'll provide, before I actually go into SimStack, I want to talk a little bit about my motivation, why I even created this solution in the first place. So quite a few years ago, we got the team very much ready with getting comfortable with Docker. And I think most of you who are doing any kind of testing probably know how Docker works. You're able to, I don't know, start up your application. You're probably able to run your test, whether it's performance test, security test, or any other kind of browser testing. I think you're probably comfortable starting that and getting that up and running with Docker on your laptop. But then at some point, once we had everybody comfortable, somebody came around the corner and said, hey, we have this brand new orchestration technology. It's called Kubernetes. And this is pretty much, everybody started moving towards Kubernetes. And you know, in those days, people were still starting to work with Docker Swarm, Docker Compose, all that kind of stuff, which is fine. I mean, you can have a mix of perhaps the local users using Docker Compose, and then over in the test environments and production, you start to work with Kubernetes. But here's the problem. We're, of course, talking about trying to shift left. And for me, shift left means getting as close to production as possible in the local environment. And I'm not doing that, of course, if I'm continuing to use Docker. So that was my very first motivation. And you'll see that also in the original name of the product. If you look at it, it's called, or it was called KX as code. And KX, of course, is knowledge transfer. So that was me trying to get my teams working with Kubernetes. So I created this whole kind of ecosystem and automations and app stores and all that kind of stuff in order that the DevOps engineers could really start to work quickly with Kubernetes. And then also, I mean, look, even in DevOps, not everybody wants to be handling infrastructure and all the things around that. And a lot of DevOps engineers also, they care about CI/CD pipelines. They perhaps care about other elements of infrastructure testing, right? So that was also my thinking is, how can I enable my team and to get much quicker to to kind of be re-engaged with the CI/CD pipelines and all that stuff, yet still make that shift towards Kubernetes. And then, of course, the other challenge that we have, and I'll go more into detail with that later, is that it's not always so easy to get everything set up locally. Of course, the alternative you have is to go to the cloud, to get a cloud instance, and all that kind of stuff. The problem with that is not all of us developers or test engineers have access to the cloud. Not all our employers are giving us the budget and providing us with access to whatever Kubernetes and various EC2 instances on AWS, for example. So again, how do we avoid that additional cost? How do we still achieve what we need to achieve running locally and not have to worry about not having access to the cloud? That's the first thing. So that's why I actually like to call my solution, I like to say it's kind of bringing the cloud home. Look, we've spent the last many years pushing everything out of the cloud. Because obviously it's also made a lot of challenge in terms of testing things and having access to the infrastructure to do that shift left. So with my solution, my aim is really to bring the cloud back home, bring it back to the laptop, then allow us to test things fully, end to end, before then going, of course, back into the cloud often, and then testing there. And as you see, and that's just one part of it. I mean, I've been at many, many client sites over the years. Every single client has a completely different set of tools. That's why I say here we have a fragmented tool ecosystem. And you only have to look at CI/CD, there's GitLab, there's Jenkins, there's people using Bitbucket. There are so many different tools. Also on the test automation, there are so many great new tools also coming out. Of course, we are here at the Lambda Test Conference. Of course, Lambda Test is one of those. And then there are lots of other frameworks, of course, that Lambda Test can run, like Playwright, Cypress, Selenium, all those things. And so again, how do we make those more accessible or more easy to run without having to, again, learn a whole new ecosystem? And as I said, you know, it's not just test engineers that will struggle and developers. There are even DevOps engineers, right, who are also struggling with this huge ecosystem, with the infrastructure management, and so on. Especially if you're automating your DevOps pipelines, your DevOps landscape, and you have to learn a lot of different tools, you have to learn a lot of APIs. And actually, I think that's one of the things I'm very much proud of in the solution that I'm demonstrating today, is I like to call it SPOI, single point of integration, because what my tool does is it provides a unified API interface into all those tools. And then I'll show you that later, because that just opens up so many possibilities, but it'd be way too early to discuss that now. And then, as I said, steep learning curve. And of course, we already touched on the high cost of replicating application landscapes. And probably I'm mentioning this a lot, because for me, this is truly one of the blockers. And yet we have so much spare capacity in our laptops. I mean, gone are the days when, I don't know, we got a 4 GB RAM laptop. Maybe I'm showing my age a little bit here. You know, we had maybe 2 cores max. These days, a lot of developer laptops and test automation laptops have a lot of spare capacity. And again, let's use that and reduce the cost and use our own capacities locally on our laptop. Probably a lot of you will already know what shift left is, but I think it's worth me just recapping on why we do shift left. Of course, the objective is faster identification of bugs and issues. And it's very important that we detect those bugs as soon as possible in the process. So it doesn't matter if that bug is in the design, if it's in the architecture, if it's in the infrastructure. We really need to make sure we capture those things as soon as possible. Especially, of course, I don't know if you've seen the V model, which probably you have. You will see that the further you get into the V model, the more expensive it gets to fix. And that's why it's so important that we shift left to find these issues, especially in the architecture, perhaps even in the functional design already, as soon as possible, in order to reduce the cost. And of course, we want to improve overall software quality. I mean, there are so many tools available that help us do that, but often there is the realization too late in the program. I mean, even if we just take something as ZonaCube in order to test the code quality, sometimes I've seen it that people are not always early enough engaging with ZonaCube or, of course, other code quality tools. And then there is this big push later on, and suddenly it becomes this 1 or 2 sprint catch up to get the code quality high, to get the quality of the software and deliverable high. But by shifting left, we have a very, very minor issue here. So especially if we integrate directly into our developer IDE, we can see straight away, look, we have a minor, I don't know, security defect here. We have a suboptimal code duplication. The code is not maintaining correctly and so on. So the sooner we start, the sooner we can correct it. And of course, the cost of correcting it and the speed to correct it is so much faster when we do it early on. And with SimStack, which I'm going to introduce in a minute, this is what, of course, we are aiming for to really achieve with SimStack. So if you look on the left-hand side, and one of the things I've really found, and it's in DevOps engineering, it's pretty much everywhere. And I think also if you look at developers are being asked to do so much more all the time, especially when there is the role of, some people talk about the role of DevOps engineer, others talk about the practice of developing through DevOps practices, right? Which means the developer has to do test automation, operations, and actually developing the end product. And there we start to produce what is called cognitive overload, because there is just so much information that everybody has to learn. We're no longer often in this specialization, because a developer has to know how the infrastructure works. They have to know how the test works and so on. So again, what we really want to achieve with SimStack is what you see on the right-hand side, is that by taking a lot of this complexity, by abstracting the complexity, that again, the developer and the test automation engineer can go back to concentrating on the end product, not worrying so much about all these additional complexities. So I think that's very important. And of course, I will go more into that later. And as I mentioned earlier, the laptops that we get today are so much more powerful. I mean, if you're running a laptop and you are just opening Word and perhaps an IDE, I am suspecting that your laptop that you have is probably heavily underutilized. And so why not use that spare capacity and to really run true workloads in order to shift left and to get as close to production as possible? Because for me, that is the only way, when you actually get to production, that you have a very good chance of zero issues, right? So let's use those capacities. So increase efficiency, increase quality, reduce cost. That's fantastic if we can achieve both of those things at the same time. And again, like I said before, how many of you actually have a cloud account? I mean, sure, you can get a free account to begin with, right? I don't know, you get maybe 300 hours or something like that free. But again, what can you actually run on those? Normally, you get access to a micro instance of whichever cloud provider you're using. That's not going to let you run heavy workloads. Look, we rolled out, and I'll go into more details later, but we did roll out the solution, at least the predecessor to the brand new solution that we have now, to actually 100 workstations in the cloud. But that's very expensive, right? So if you think that everybody has to have between 16 and 32 gig RAM, they have between 4 and 8 CPUs, that gets very expensive. You multiply that by 100 workstations. Now imagine, instead of having those 100 workstations in the cloud, we had actually the opportunity to run it locally and save that cost, and that's exactly what we aim to do with SimStack. And we're getting very close to me actually showing you SimStack. And I discussed before that the original version was 𝐾𝐚𝐭𝐫𝐤 code. And actually, we have completely rewritten it. So the original solution, we spent about 3 years developing it. We rolled it out, had a lot of great experience with it, lots of productivity gains. But as I said, it was costly. So what is the difference now with this new version? Well, I can tell you one thing. The original version was extremely tech heavy. So I am often a techie, and I think the original solution really reflected that. It was a Linux desktop environment. It was written entirely in Bash with Bash scripts. It worked very well. And the framework that we developed out of that, so that was the framework with 3 years usage, 3 years development. We put a lot of enterprise features into that framework, and it really grew over time. So the good thing is that is not lost. We've taken that great framework that we developed previously and put it into a new product. However, the big difference now is that we are going a different approach, which is we're going from the UX down to the back end, rather than starting with the back end and then doing the kind of user experiences and afterthought, which we never really managed to fully achieve with the original 𝐾𝐚𝐭𝐫𝐤 code. But SimStack, which you will see when I do the demo, it's very, very user-friendly. The other thing is it was very, very heavyweight because you always had to build a whole virtual machine. And then one of the challenges that we had is, especially with the Mac, for example, going to an ARM64 processor, it meant that we couldn't run this virtual machine everywhere because it simply wasn't compatible. Now with a new lightweight binary, we can literally run it everywhere. And so it's a bit like, I think if you look at VS Code and some of these other tools, or even Docker Desktop, they use the Electron framework. With this tool, we're also using the Electron framework. What we've also done is we've integrated a Python backend directly into our solution. So literally, you can download that binary, you install it, and you're straight away a very powerful backend and a very powerful front end. But above all, we have a great user experience. And another thing, the main aim is really the next 2 points as well, which is to enable you, the user, to run locally. And so nevertheless, there are still times when we might want to run it by teams. And one of the things that we really wanted to enable was, look, if you've configured the tool once for one developer, what's really important, if you have a team of test automation engineers or a team of developers, why not create a template out of that first that was created with the first developer and roll it out to remaining developers, and then it makes the rollout much faster. And of course, the original solution, it was very complex, it was difficult, even for very experienced DevOps engineers to really understand quickly how the solution works, how to customize it, how to maintain it. Again, this is something that we've done. Another thing that I'm very proud of, and it's a little bit also part of the point I just made with the complex to simplified. Before, we didn't have any Node.js AI integration. Now, the benefit that we have is because this is a brand new solution, we have that benefit that we can straight away bring Gen AI into it. So when we look at, for example, I was saying before, it was difficult to customize. So because, of course, we now know how tools like ChatGPT and other Gen AI solutions work, what we built in straight away is that, let's just say we have a new test tool or a new development tool out there. We want to add it to our app store or application library. Now, with the previous solution, you would have to pass like 10 files to ChatGPT and explain in a really difficult way on how to enable this new tool into our solution. But that's not the case anymore. Because of now we know how Gen AI works, we have you now pass a single template to ChatGPT or any other Gen AI, and it's immediately creating everything that's needed in order to add new test automation or DevOps tool or dev tool to our solution. And I'll be showing that a little bit later as well. So with that said, yes, we talk about going from something that's very complex to something that's very simple. Could it really be that we've been able to create something that is maybe as easy as building a house with Lego? Look, we all grew up with Lego, at least I did. And I remember I had my building blocks, and all I had to do was put these things together, and at the end I had a nice house. So the aim that I really have with this solution is, how can I make something that's really complex but accessible to everybody? I mean, if you think about when you go to your mobile phone and you install an app, what do? You open the App Store, you install it, and you get an icon on your mobile phone or your desktop. Why can't it be like that here, right? So I'll show you also in a minute in the demo. Of course, Lego is a little bit maybe exaggerated, but it just to really make it come home that I believe that we've really achieved something here, and we've really made something a lot simpler, something that is actually very complex when you get into the detail. So now we get into why SimStack. You know, 𝐾𝐚𝐭𝐫𝐤, that was the original solution. It was there to transfer knowledge. Now, I think when you looked at the original description for this talk, it was called StackMore. To be honest, StackMore didn't really do it for me because it didn't say what this tool is really doing. So since then, we've given the tool a new name. It's now called SimStack. And you can see by this picture here, because we're really talking about a symphony of tools. So because we have this single point of integration, it means that we're able to use drag and drop interfaces to really orchestrate all the various tools through a single user interface. That is why we have called it SimStack now. And as you'll see here, the key features of our new solution. Now, first of all, there are a lot of tools out there that allow you to manage Kubernetes clusters, but at the end, what we want a single tool that allows you to manage everything without having to constantly switch to different tools. Then we have, as I mentioned a minute ago, we have an app store. But one thing we realized is that, look, apps are rarely installed on their own, right? They're always installed as a group. So you might have the application that you are currently working on. You might have test automation tools that need to be installed with the applications. You might have CI/CD tools that need to be installed. So we have this concept of app groups so that you don't install one tool, then the other, then this one. Because not only do we usually install multiple tools at once, but we install tools that are integrated with each other. So I might have a CI/CD pipeline that at the end is calling tools like a Lambda test or SonarQube and other tools like that. In addition, I'm not just installing, Lambda test, Hyper Execute. I'm not just installing SonarQube. But the reason why I need those tools is because I have a product where I want to ensure high quality. Now we're getting to the realm of the tool managing your infrastructure, managing your CI/CD or generally your DevOps layer, but then also installing, building, compiling, and then running the various tests against your sort of application. And remember that when we shift left, we want to test everything, right? So not just the architecture, not just the design, not just the actual end deliverable, but what happens when we go to production? Is our monitoring working correctly? Are our integrations to other infrastructure tools like, I don't know, certificate management or any of those, is that all working correctly? Yeah. And then we see here unified SPOI, drag and drop dashboards, drag and drop pipelines. I think it's best if you see those in a minute. And then again, we have here the Gen AI integration, where we now can also, the way we deployed something, we also make calls to Gen AI, for example, for the things that we've installed into our Kubernetes cluster, and we get some feedback and some recommendations from Gen AI to say, hey, you could have made this more secure, you're not really following best practices, and so on. And here it's really in a nutshell how this is kind of working at a really high level. So you have your app store, you have your tools. The tools you can group together, install them. They get automatically installed onto your laptop. Once they're installed on your laptop, the integrations are automatically exposed, which in turn enable drag and drop dashboards and drag and drop pipelines. And in a minute, I'm going to go into the demo, and we will see the quick flow, which I will show, which is, let's just say you've just installed SimStack. So first, you would go into the App Store, you would install your needed applications. Then you can go ahead and manage those using the inbuilt Kubernetes manager. You can then optionally define native tasks. That's one thing I had mentioned before, is that not only do you have immediately access to existing API functions and also API metrics, which you can then display on the dashboard, but you can also define your own custom tasks and include those as well. So you have a choice. Either use CI/CD pipelines that you already have and literally just make an API call to a Jenkins or a GitLab job, or maybe directly call Lambda test, for example, using the inbuilt tasks function. So I'll show that also in a minute. And finally, you can create additional dashboards. And because you have the API, all the APIs consolidated, you can now create a single dashboard. Let's just say I needed to maintain everything. And I need to create users, and I need to do various different things in various tools. I can just put widgets on the dashboard, and then I can already start managing all those tools. It's very ambitious. We still have lots of functions that we need to bring in. But as you can see, I think we have a really fantastic concept here, and you will see in a minute that the concept works very well. And we're starting to get into time where I need to start looking at the demos. So I'll just quickly, I won't go too much into this because I think I've talked about a lot of the key benefits already. For me, one of the most critical things is, and I see this a lot, is this cognitive overload. And this is great because this is one thing that is really solved with this, because these days, developers, test automation engineers, they have to do so many things when they arrive on a project, much more than we used to before the whole concept of DevOps. So for me, that's the main thing. And I think I've talked about the other stuff already, so I'm going to continue from this. The example use case, again, I talked about that earlier as well. But the key thing is that once we rolled out the solution to all the developers, we actually managed to reduce onboarding from 1 month to 1 day. So just imagine that when we look at end-to-end provisioning, because the solution is fully customizable, it's not just installing a plain vanilla Jenkins, a plain vanilla GitLab, a plain vanilla whatever the solution is that you need to test, a plain vanilla SonarQube or Lambda test, hyper execute. You're installing and fully configuring the whole solution so that when it runs through, the entire thing runs through end-to-end. And we did have some very complex scenarios, actually, that I think one of our workstations ended up, because we had a lot of test data. So you know also, your experience in testing, you know that at the end, a test is successful or fails based on the test data, especially with test automation. Test data is so important. And we had some test data that was so large, it was taking half an hour just to import the test data. But at the end, when that workstation was provisioned end-to-end, maybe it took 30 to 45 minutes, but it was done, right? And then the developer could, and the test automation engineer could start right away. One of the things, the feedback we got from the developers is, sometimes the documentation is not so fantastic. We didn't understand how to do the configuration. We didn't understand what test data was needed. We didn't know really how to install it properly and what all the dependencies are. All of that was solved through our customized workstation. And of course, the future vision is we're going to continue with the deeper Gen AI integration. We want to continue making it compatible with everything. So working with even WSL for Windows, all these things. We're pretty much there already, but we need to continue testing it and making sure that we really have that full compatibility. But the beauty of the new solution is that it's lightweight, and because of the way it installs now, it's much easier to get it running on multiple platforms and even multiple CPUs. Like, for example, the big challenge we had with our initial solution was when the Apple released the ARM64 CPU, and suddenly we had a lot of stuff that wasn't working anymore because it was geared towards the AMD 64 CPU. And as I mentioned before, they enable creation of unified administration panels. So that's the thing is, yes, we're focused at the moment mainly on test automation and development, but at the end, because we can access all API endpoints of all tools, actually, we can even start to create really operations panels out of it that are sort of I'm an ops guy. I can, in theory, have a panel just geared towards creating users on all these tools, and I don't need to log into all the various tools anymore. So let's dive into the demo. And here is my workstation. Okay, so here is SimStack. What is here, for example, like in my App Store, I first get a list of applications. So these are things that I have installed at the moment in my example environment. So for example, if I'm testing something, probably I have an application that I need to test. So I could just go in here and I open my Hipster shop, and I can now have my deployed application ready. And also, if I, of course, I might have also Jenkins running. And here again, we get to having a unified platform, which gives me everything. So you can see here, I'm being asked for an admin password. I don't know what my admin password is. But the good news is that if I go to my tool, and of course, there is so much that this tool can do that I've really spoken about a small part of everything this tool can do. But we have here, for example, the secrets manager. So I'm going to go in here, and I can, for example, get my Jenkins admin password. I'm going to go in here, and I'm going to copy that password, and I'm going to go into my Jenkins job, and I'm going to sign in. And now you see I have two things here. I have my Lambda test job, and I have my test job. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, what I want to do is, let me just show you actually, remember I said before that we have the unified API. With that unified API, you also have it accessible here. And you can see that if you create custom tasks, that API endpoint is automatically available to the front end. That is why you can automatically drag and drop it. As soon as you've created a task, your own task, it's immediately available in the drag and drop interface. When you see here, for example, metrics, those are the out-of-the-box metrics that the tool provides. When you see a function, that is the out-of-the-box function that the tool provides. What we are doing here is we're unifying all those APIs, so you can also see here Mattermost, you can see GitLab, you can see Jenkins, all of those are unified into this tool. So let's go back, and let's go to the App Store. So first of all, I said that the first thing I would want to do is I would want to install some tools. So you can see here I have a list of available tools here. This is just a small selection. What I can do is I can say, hey, well, what things do I need to run for my, I don't know, I just onboarded a developer and I need them to install a minimum set of tools. So what I'll do is I'm going to select the group apps. You can see now that everything was automatically selected that is needed for this environment. And what I can do now is I can actually add them to basket. You can now see that I have 6 tools that have been added, and I can now install those. The other thing is we're all familiar. We shop on Amazon and other shops all the time. So again, this is part of simplifying things, giving us things that we know, things that we do every day, which is going shopping. Except here, I'm going shopping for some complex DevOps test automation and various other tools, right? Then what do I want to do? I now want to create my tasks, but let's go into managing my task chains. So I'm going to go here, and because we don't really have that much time anymore, in fact, I think we're very much running out of time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly show you. I won't execute it because that would take too long. You can see I've pre-prepared a test execution pipeline. Now, all those things can be dragged and dropped into the dashboard. You can see how many tools I've consolidated here into a single pipeline simply by dragging and dropping them. I have GitLab building the code. I am running a scan with SonarQube. Then I'm going to deploy them because I'm happy with the code quality. Then I deploy, and I'm going to clear the cache before I run my test. Then I'm going to do a quick site speed IO test to check that the performance of my application is good. I'm going to run a security test. Then I'm going to, and of course, here's important for this round here. You can also see I'm going to run my playwright test to make sure that I haven't broken anything since I last did the last deployment. Of course, I'm running that test using playwright, and I'm using hypertest execute. Then at the end, I'm going to generate a whole bunch of reports from lambda tests, from my site speed execution, of course, also from my security test. And once I've done all those things, I'm now ready to go to test. And then right at the end of that, I can deploy to test. And you can see here, you might think, but why are they using GitLab and Jenkins? I don't know, maybe we have some teams that have chosen to work differently. Maybe one team preferred Jenkins and the team preferred GitLab. And then you can just simply, it doesn't matter anymore because we can just drag and drop whatever has been produced onto this dashboard and just run it all together. Then what I might want to see is I might want to see how my deployment is going. So what I can do now, I can go into my, I can go out and let's have a look at Jenkins. I can now see here with Jenkins, my CPU usage and so on. At the moment, there's currently no data available. I can also have a quick some logs. And now again, here we talk about Gen AI. So what I can do here is, let's just say I have a warning here. I'm going to go in here. So again, it's about rethinking with Gen AI. How can I take Gen AI to my advantage? So I can now say, what does this mean? If I can type. And then I'm going to submit that. So now what I'm doing is I'm going off to Gen AI to ask, hey, what does it mean? I'm immediately getting an answer from Gen AI, and it's giving me some information on what that error means. And of course, you can also select multiple error messages, but this is starting to rethink the tools that we used to is how do we use Gen AI to make ourselves even more efficient rather than opening now a tab into another browser session. But why not just do that directly in here rather than copying and pasting? So I think I'm very much running out of time here. Again, you can see here that I can ask various questions here, and I'll get an answer on what, for example, test tools I can install into the SimStack solution. And I think there is so much more to show, but I think we are running out of time. Let's just see. I guess I have a couple more minutes, so let me just show. Let me just see what we could show here. One last thing I did want to show is the next thing that we would do is with the metadata editor. So this is how do I add new solutions. So at the end, we have with everything that we install, and you can see we're migrating at the moment from the old solution to the new, and that's automated, of course. But for example, if I want to install Jenkins at the moment, you see that there's a few things that you would need to configure, like install scripts and so on. Of course, we are taking care of that in our library. That is part of our solution. But at the end, if there's a new tool that you wanted to add that wasn't yet part of the solution, we are in the process of using a Gen AI generator that creates everything that you need here from the tasks. For example, here we start in Jenkins to the actual installation, to health checks, and so on. So in future, it's going to be very easy to even extend this great tool and the great compatibility that we already have here. The only thing I haven't shown actually yet is the dashboard. So I'm going to quickly go to the dashboard. Again, I'm going to go into edit mode. And then I'm going to select the dashboard that, of course, I prepared for this demo. And then you can see here, fantastic. All I did with these things that you see here is I dragged and dropped these things from the functions that are available anyway through the tools. So for example, here, we've literally just used existing out-of-the-box Jenkins build, but of course, they're now integrated into a unified API, and we're able to access those directly and just drop widgets onto our dashboard, tell our solution which job it is that we're actually interested in, and straight away you see, wow, here I have a chart of our success versus a failure rate. Here I can see how long those jobs are running, and also I can see here a more detailed table if it wasn't enough for me, what I saw up here. Of course, that can be extended. But there we have it. This is the solution as it is today. We're continuing to work on the solution. And of course, what we would really like from you is feedback on what you think would be useful for you, what would really help your job. And then yeah, we will add those to our backlog and get those things added. All right, so I guess, do we go into the...
Perfect. Great. Thanks. Thanks, Patrick, for the amazing session. This was very insightful. I'm sure audience learned a lot of things about shift left and how to basically leverage SimStack, to power the shift left strategy in their development cycles. Now I know we are almost at the top of the hour, but we'll still kind of take few questions. There were a lot of interesting questions from the audience here, so I'll try pick few of those just for you to kind of go over. So this is one of the question from Vikas. So can we expect to grow shift left approach in software development?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but let's just say I think shifting left, it has to be part of our software delivery. Look, if you look at it this way, we're very much in an agile world. We want to deliver software faster and faster all the time. Now, one of the great risks of delivering software fast is exactly the quality. So we need to make sure that we shift left as much as possible, so that actually we don't introduce too much risk to our production rollouts. Look, when before DevOps started, one of the very first things I realized with agile development was that we needed to automate things and we needed to test things and get constant feedback as soon as possible, because otherwise you spend too much time in your 2-week sprint actually going after environment issues rather than actually working on the end product, which is, of course, that's what we need to spend the most time. So the sooner we figure out what the issues are, the sooner we can fix them, and the lower the risk we have in production. And this is where really we aim for SimStack to help you.
Perfect. So I've got a few other questions. So this one is from Rishi. In shift left scenario, how does the cost proposition looks like for infra orchestration, licensing, and hosting? There's another extension.
Yeah, at the end, look, of course, if you are using open source technologies, then licensing is not such an issue. Of course, if you are in an enterprise scenario, it could well be that you're not using open source software, in which case, of course, your employer or whoever it is, your client still is going to have to make sure that you have developer license for whatever tools that you're running. So, for example, when we rolled it out a while back, we actually had SAP Hybris installed into our solution. We also had Adobe Experience Manager running into our solution. So we didn't just run it with simple microservices that are completely custom development. We really had large monolithic applications also running here, which, first of all, that was what was so complex, right? And we customized that. And that's how we really got from 1 month to 1 day, because we took something that was very complex and really automated it. But at the end of the day, you still need those licenses, right? Unless you're doing open source, you still need to do that. But yeah, for most of the infrastructure components, most of the clients that I see, they're using a lot of the open source. Kubernetes is open source. Especially even if you're using OpenShift, right? You still have Minishift and those kind of things that will allow you to use free software. So I think for the most part, as long as you're not in the cloud, but you're running it locally on your laptop and you're not using enterprise software which requires licensing, then I think you don't really have an issue with licensing.
Awesome. I know we got like almost 10 other questions, but in the interest of time, we'll take another one here. How to avoid unannounced changes in requirements in shifting left approach?
Yeah, I think this is something that we see all the time in teams. I mean, this is kind of, it's for me, this is discipline, right? At the end, you're always going to have a product owner, you're going to have business analysts, and you're going to have a scrum master. I mean, of course, you're going to have developers who are developing the end product, right? So for me, there is nothing that any automation tool is going to solve for you. It's pure discipline. So you need to make sure that once the story has gone into the sprint, that the scope stays, or you have to take something else out of the story, and you know that in reality that we don't want to change anything that's going on in the sprints. But at the end, sometimes you have no choice, right? But then we have to recognize that we have a certain amount of story points, or however your estimations are going, that can be delivered in that sprint, right? And then if you're changing and making unannounced changes, then the product owner at the end has to appreciate that something else is not going to get delivered, right? So yeah, I'm afraid this is a discipline thing. It's nothing we're going to solve with SimStack.
Awesome. This was great. Thanks, Patrick, for answering all those questions and for the insightful session. I think we're almost over the top of the hour, but I think we still had a few other questions which we couldn't address. But thanks everyone for joining, and thanks again, Patrick, for this great session. And just for the attendees, this session was recorded. So, and in fact, all of the other sessions as well at TestMu are recorded. So this will be available at Delamere's YouTube channel, so you can go back and listen to them again and share them with your peers. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. Cheers. Bye.